Hello and welcome to another episode of the LSAT Report. Today we're going to be talking about Trump's tariffs on solar panels. First and foremost, I am a conservationist. I don't consider myself a environmentalist. I think environmentalism requires that the government take control and try to force or compel people to operate a certain way, whereas conservationism is something you can do individually. Shut your lights off, turn your water off, reduce your usage, and make those impacts. I think most things are going to come from that. But with this, if you've seen the reports, many of them aim to show that he's either trying to destroy the solar industry, and other ones are trying to say that he's going to hurt the industry in order to help coal, because he said he wants to help the coal industry. So is that the case? Well, let's see about that. The first thing I want to do is give a little brief history on why are we talking about this at all. And I think it's important. I'm a huge fan of solar and other renewables, but particularly solar. And so China is the focus of these tariffs. There's going to be a 31% tariff on their solar panels, or the photovoltaic cells, the PV cells. So in China, as we all know, they use central planning. They are able to take money from one sector in order to help out another sector. And they had a big push to become a huge portion or a larger portion of their energy production from solar. And so what they did is they made it so they subsidized the manufacturers of those PV cells, those photovoltaics. And a side benefit to that was, since they were producing it at basically a loss, they then could sell them for much less on the market. And that's what happened, is all those cells started reaching our shores, and they're selling for a price that's way less than competitive for our own providers, our own suppliers of those same types of cells. There was an increase during the Obama administration of solar use. You can remember back to the kind of the debacle where they gave $585 million of loan guarantees to Solyndra, I believe it was called. It ended up being a huge problem. The company went under, and we were put foot in the bill on that thing. Kind of like the banker bailouts, but sun bailouts. Pretty neat. And I did it at the expense, in my opinion, of our own solar industry, allowing those, not really putting any curbing on picking one business over another. Solyndra was a manufacturer of solar cells, and so by the government backing them, all the other ones that didn't have government backing were kind of left at a loss. So, and it also, he did it at the detriment of our other industries, energy manufacturing industries. So to get to the base of this, you have to look at what the average cost is. What does this actually mean? What are they currently looking at? So the average cost on Alibaba, from my research, shows that Chinese versus U.S. Comparable cells, they sell them for about half. And China has about a 60% market share globally. And so you can assume that 60% of our cells that we get are also from them, I would assume. Maybe more, because they're less expensive. Now, we all know that Trump has stated his desire to boost the coal industry. And you have to ask yourself, is that what's behind these tariffs? And is he trying to ruin the industry to benefit coal? Because, you know, they're competitors for our energy output and consumption, production. And we have to ask kind of the basic questions: who, what, when, where, why. And so I'm going to go through there and kind of show you what I came up with. I educated myself on this as I normally do. I know most people don't have the time, so hopefully what you can see is I put a lot of time into actually figuring out the nuts and bolts of this thing. So that I'm not going to tell you necessarily what to think. I'll tell you what I think, but through my information, hopefully you can see that it's fair and you can come with your own opinion. So what we want to take a look at is what exactly is this thing, the tariff. What they did is they did a 31% tariff on imports from China on these photovoltaic cells. And it's on a 4-year phase out. So over the next 4 years, they're going to phase that out so that it won't be a tariff anymore. Okay, so in 4 years, there'll be a zero tariff. Along with this, they have, through the Department of Energy, a $3 million prize for innovation and production that's out for anybody to grab. That's put out through the Solar Energy Technology Office. And on top of that as well, they're going to allow per year 2.5 gigabytes of energy producing cells to be able to come in. Each cell produces so much through its solar uptake, and they're going to allow 2.5 gigabytes of capacity to come in tariff-free. And so, so the cons of this. So I looked up who is bitching the most, and they said, according to Solar Energy Industries Association, they expect there to be 23,000 of the 260,000 jobs will be affected by this. They expect to lose that many. Now, the majority of those, from what I could tell, would be the actual installers and the electricians. And these are well-paying jobs, especially the electricians, and supposedly they will have the disruption. Now, they didn't give any specifics on those things, so I had to kind of ask some questions and look further. But now the manufacturers of the photovoltaic cells claim that they will see a result net gain in jobs of 114,000. And so you'd compare the 23,000 jobs potentially lost to the 114,000 claimed jobs that will grow. And it, to me, I mean, just on that, well, why wouldn't you do it? These people who are working in this part of the industry could just flop over here, a little more training, and we'd have those jobs. Well, I don't think either of the numbers are exactly accurate. I think it's, they're going to throw numbers out that are going to sound impressive. Obviously, if there's more producing, there will be some jobs there. If there's an impact to the industry, you would lose jobs there. And so I'm going to just kind of take a look at this. What would be the actual impact? So we have to take a look at where are the uses of these things. You have residential and you have things like solar farms, so a larger scale producing for a bunch of families. The residential system, on average, is about a 5 kilowatt system that someone would install to take their needs, and they would sell that additional extra energy back out to the grid. The solar farm, they produce somewhere around a megawatt on average, meaning 1 million watts. And the costs to install a system residentially is about $3 to $4 per watt. And now, because you have larger scale and buying power on those solar farms, it's actually only about $1 per watt in order to fund that. So for a typical home, you're looking at about $19,250 in Minnesota. A solar farm, since it's $1 per watt and it's a megawatt, you're looking at about $1 million. Okay, so you kind of have the numbers. Now, with residential systems, the federal government will give you a 30% rebate, bringing your cost down $5,775, making your grand total of your outlay of money in order to install a 5 kilowatt system is $13,475. All right, so let's, now because we're talking about the solar panels, that's only one component of that entire cost that you would acquire. And there's different ways of getting one of these systems. I'll kind of go off on a segue here. There's ways of you don't have to put any money down and you basically just lease the equipment through your power company, or you can purchase it, and you can actually do without having to put all the outlay. You can actually finance those things, sometimes 5, sometimes 10 years. So I'll go into this. So the breakdown of costs, you have hard and soft costs. Hard costs would be the panels themselves, the inverters to take the energy and make it usable for your home, and and the mounting. And the inverters and the mounting are about 2% of the cost. 34% of that entire $13,400 that you would be looking at, 34% goes to panels. All right. Now you have soft costs included in there, and see, these are some of the things that the Trump administration is saying they're going to try to take care of, to lower. So you have labor costs, which I'm not sure he could do anything about. You have permitting, which could definitely be taken care of. He's doing a lot of deregulation. You have the other costs are supply chain, marketing, inspection. So building inspector, that type of thing, or electrical inspection. You have a hooking up to the grid, and then you have the financing costs. And altogether, those are about 64% of the entire costs are soft costs. Now, since we're just talking about the panels, because that's what's going to be affected by this tariff, what exactly is that going to mean? So you do the math on this. 34% of that 13,000 puts you at about 4581 is what my figures come up to be with the math of the cost. And so when you're looking at the difference between what you could currently buy panels for from China versus what they're gonna be at the 30% increase, you're looking at about, my figures came out to be $823. Okay, now I like money, and I'd like to save $800 wherever possible. But when I'm talking about, let's say I'm going to buy a car for $13,000, if I couldn't haggle down that $800, I'm not sure that would be the differentiation. If I really like the product, I don't think $800 is going to make that much difference. And especially so what difference would that make? Instead of $4,581, you'd be looking at $5,413 and 50 cents. Now, like I said, you can finance this stuff, which typically if you're going to buy a car, that's what this would be. And so what would that actually be on a monthly basis? If you would finance it for 5 years, you'd be looking at $13.30 a month. And if you're looking at 10 years, you're looking at about $6.66 a month. Now, for me, I'm not sure how many jobs, how I can totally buy that 23,000 jobs would be lost because of a $13.30 difference, or less, a $6.60 difference. That if I'm selling these panels to someone, trying to talk them into that, I don't think it's going to be that hard of a thing. And most people, if you're selling this system, they're probably not going to see that anyway. How would they know about that $800 difference? You're not talking about massive amounts of money in the whole scheme of things. So I'm not sure that would be where the jobs would be lost. So the natural thing would say, well, okay, so not the residential side, but let's look at the solar farm side, because I mean, you're talking about massive amounts of money here, $1 million on average. So the argument there that I could find was that, well, let's say a city or somebody wanted to put in one of these solar farms. They wanted to spend $1 million, and they're probably going to have to do this through some sort of loan, which would be in the form of bonds, municipal bonds. Well, if they know that in 1 year it's going to be less expensive, they'll say, hey, you know what, we're just going to hold off another year, or maybe even 4 years. Now, there's a lot of loss in there, so I wouldn't think they'd go 4 years, because the money that they could save in energy production would probably make up that difference. But 1 year might be a reasonable argument. So these companies are saying that they're going to have these huge issues because, you know, this 1 year is probably going to make them lose all these jobs. But my question would be, well, how long are you planning to be in business? What kind of businessman are you? I mean, I guess if it was me, I would probably say, well, I know it's going to be phased out, and I couldn't really find the good figures in what those phase-outs would be, what the reductions from 31 to 20 to 12 to 0, or whatever the amounts are. But you could do the math on those things, and you could say, well, I know that as we go out further, if I charge a little bit more right now, the amount I make up on the backside by continuing those and probably building inflation. And so my costs are actually going up, while in 4 years my costs of putting one of these systems in is actually going down. Plus I'm probably financing this thing. So I think a businessman, if it was me, and I'm planning to be in business for at least 4 years, probably 10 years, if I'm going to have this kind of infrastructure in place where I'm installing some of these things. It takes about 2 years to get one of these. Well, to be able to do one of these things takes some effort. So I'm not sure I buy that either. I'm not sure how many jobs are going to be lost. And so I'm kind of looking at this from the point of, it seems a little debunked. I think it's a scare tactic because they don't want to have to deal with the rising prices. They like the profit margins that they have. And so maybe with an expanded market, you might actually be able to make more money. But that's my argument on that side. That's what I've found there. So you have to decide, so whose side is he on? This is the real big question at basis here. Is he on coals or solars? Why not both? Why couldn't he be looking at it both? Energy is one of the largest costs and differentiators between a society expanding, getting better. To go from third world to first world, it requires you to have the ability to produce goods, that type of thing. That only happens when you have cheap energy. That's why China is burning tons and tons of coal. Battery's kind of dying. And we know we have to move in the direction of solar or renewable. So let's take a look at it. Currently, we're using about 65% of our energy comes from fossil fuels, so coal, natural gas, that type of thing. 20% nuclear, and 15% is renewable. Only 6% comes from solar. So we have huge possibilities here. Huge growth possibilities of jobs, of income, of overall decreasing our energy, our impact, regardless of what side you are on the environmental side or conservation side, whatever. I think everybody is in favor of using solar. It's less expensive. At the very least, it costs less money. So, who started this? Was it all Trump's idea? Well, actually, if you look at it, why are we looking at this anyway? This actually was started by the photovoltaic community, the manufacturers. They're saying, hey, we can't compete. These guys are selling it, they're dumping is what they call it. They're dumping all their product on our shores and selling it for below cost. We can't compete. People like Elon Musk of Tesla. So I took a look. They wanted to level the playing field. I took a look at the top 10 manufacturers because if Elon Musk is involved in this, we all know that the guy is definitely in favor of renewable. And so, and he's not dumb when it comes to business. And so he's taking a look, he says, because we have, in this agreement, we're going to allow that 2.5 gigawatts of photovoltaic cells to come in. Well, why 2.5 gigawatts? That seems, it could be an arbitrary number, but when you're talking about things of this scale, very little is just a guess. There's usually a reason behind it. So here, let me take a look at this. You have, with China has 60% of the panels. Let's say 60% is what we're actually getting from them. If we just cut that out, if we have no supplier and we still have a demand for people putting up solar, we know that that's the case. A lot of communities, regardless of where they stand, the politics of it are having them go ahead and put more solar as their fuel source. And so how do you meet that demand if all of a sudden we lose our suppliers of these photovoltaic cells? I'm going to go to the history a little bit. In 2016, we had the high of installed solar cells to produce energy. We had enough, it was about 15 gigawatts worth of those panels installed. So they can now produce 15 gigawatts in that year additionally to what they had. Now, in 2017, it took a nosedive for whatever reason. Maybe because there was a little bit of, some of this was talking about that there was going to be potential tariffs or there was a hubbub going on. It reduced it by about half. We had about 7.5 gigawatts of those panels installed. And so they expect about the same in 2018. So if we are expecting to install 7.5 gigawatts of panel producing capacity, and we're only allowing 2.5 gigawatts of tariff-free gigawatts panels or cells into this country, where are we going to make up that additional 5 gigawatts? Well, it just so happens that the top 10, and there's many more, but just the top 10 produce, currently their capacity is to produce 5 gigawatts of panels on solar cells. And that's where they currently are. I know Tesla deals with Panasonic. Together, they can go up at least another half of a gig, and then between the other ones, you got about another half a gig. So we have the capacity to do about 6 gigawatts worth of panel-producing cells that we can produce in our country currently. We can more than meet the demand. And this doesn't even take into account, like I said, the other solar manufacturers. It doesn't take into account opening up the market so that investment can take place. These companies aren't going to invest if they know that they can't sell their stuff, if there's no market for it, if they can't compete. Well, now there is. Well, shoot, now it makes sense for us to go and get another loan and expand and hire a whole bunch of people. A lot of the manufacturing takes place, it's very automated, but there's still people that work there. It also doesn't take into account technological innovation. There's other kinds of systems that are very promising, amazing through my research I found. Different ways of the actual cells being produced, different kind of materials. Currently they run at about, on average, 16, maybe up to 19% effectiveness of pulling energy from the sun. They have cells that can do 22%. And potentially some of the new materials that are less expensive to manufacture can go up to 70% efficiency. So there's a lot of things out there. Now, if there's more money that these companies, there's an incentive for them to actually put more money into R&D, not rely upon institutions, but if my company actually needs to do this, we're going to start putting some money into R&D. And there's one thing that America has always been good at is innovation. That's where we excel. Always have. China might be able to produce them, but they're not innovating, not like we do. And so one of the other ways that I believe the costs are going to start coming down and dramatically, and especially is the area in the soft cost. They have a customer acquisition. You got to pay to get your customers marketing. But one of the things that really takes up a lot of that bulk of that cost is in supply chain. So shipping from China, if you've ever done it, isn't cheap. If we're making them in America, you can get stuff here more quickly and less expensively, for sure. That's going to cut a lot of costs out. Not to mention that if I was a producer and I could also have the customer acquisition and the installer all in-house, you could reduce costs that way. You're not farming it out. There's not a markup of the supply chain. So as these firms grow, they're afforded bulk buying as well. If I can now buy, I can start negotiating better terms on the supplies I need in order to, for producing my photovoltaic cells. So, is he in the pocket of coal? Oh, I think he wants coal to do all. I think he wants energy to be cheap. Is he anti-solar? Far from it. I think this was a very smart move. I think it's a great move for everybody. I think the cost of solar is going to start coming down precipitously. So, and I don't think it will be his undoing. Unfortunately, I think it's a lot of hype and not a lot of substance. But we're coming up on a long time here. I appreciate you taking some time listening to what I have to say. Hopefully you learned something. As always, like, subscribe, and share. And I look forward to talking to you again. Have a good day.